All right, welcome everyone to the United Independent Compensatory Code System concept, a compensatory counter-racist code. So we're going through pages 14 through 32, and getting started. You really can't. It's hard to summarize the parts we read for this kind of book because it's such a different kind of book. So maybe we could start with like our biggest like takeaways from what we read. Like what were some new insight we got from these intro pages? Is everyone understand the question?
Yeah. For me, like this whole 14 to 32, I would say every section I learned something from, and I gained something from exponentially. Um, Something that I noticed that I really like about Mr. Fuller is that he actually like explains things and defines things and doesn't use examples or rambling. And so the parts that I really liked were like the distinguishing between white people and white supremacists, and the reactions to white supremacy. I liked the different isms that people have, um, and I really liked the strategies in terms of um, like racial classification confusion, population tailoring, population dislocation confusion. Like all of those things are so accurate, and I'm sure every single one of us has examples of that happening to us or to someone in our lives. And I just like that when I see it now, I don't have to call it any other name, but this is refinement of white supremacy using the strategy of like racial showcasing. So I just really like that. um I gained a lot from this section. Yeah, I guess I
Mhm.
passed it.
Yeah, I like. Well, did you pass it to someone, Ash?
Pass it through.
Uh, um, I like on page 18. I like how he's able to make this really insanely complex system really like easy to understand, and he really simplifies it. I really like the two basic reactions to racism, white supremacy, which are cooperation with white supremacy or resistance to white supremacy. um that was some of my biggest insights, and also the four stages of white supremacy: establishment, maintenance, expansion, and refinement. But we'll talk about those as we progress in the discussion. I'd like to popcorn or pass it to Mr. Dale. Corinthians, CJ.
Here. Um, he, yeah, I'm here. So,
Did you hear the question?
not really.
What was something insightful that you read?
Um, I like the part when, oops, charger fell. I like the
Can you speak up or get closer to your mic, CJ?
um, yeah, yeah. Fuck, trying to open the part, bro. Oh my god.
All right. Good.
Okay.
Yeah. Who?
As far read through the pages, I definitely agree with what you were saying in regards to page 18 on the cooperation or resistance. I guess you could call this as a form of resistance, just being on this call. Um, and then also, I have the 1984 edition, so I can see that he improved the code by adding the 6 major racist strategies, by adding those into the code book. And I would say out of the few strategies that I read, it's like a racial dislocation is one that's taking place throughout this pandemic. People being dislocated due to not having a job in the area of labor. And that's all I got for right now.
That's fine. We're just getting started. Do you want to send it over to someone?
I'll pass it to B.
I guess I'm pretty much like piggybacking off what 0526 had already stated about the 4 basic stages of racism. That really stood out to me because I was able to, with all of the definitions of each of the 4 steps, I was able to understand more and more how they were able to make this craft that I've called a craft, honestly. They are just really, I don't want to say the word smart, but I don't know what word I'm looking for, but this helped me realize what we're actually dealing with when it comes to white supremacy, racism, white supremacy. So that to me on page 21 stood out the most to me. And I will popcorn to Sandra.
Okay. On what stood out to me was on page 26, where it talks about racial population dislocation confusion, and it reminded me, it got me thinking a lot about what's going on right now, I guess, and how the students in the schools, the non-white students, are being affected at much more alarming rates by this pandemic, and how the homes are being lost and all that, and obviously how that's going to affect things into the future, which obviously it doesn't look good. Or what people, that big corporations, are dominating, which seem to be very connected with this current white supremacy system. And I popcorn to V.
I already went Sandra.
Oh, I'm sorry. Who didn't go? Dan?
I already went too.
Let's popcorn to Ethan.
I remember. I heard everything that was said, words wise, but not the names. I'm sorry. Sorry, I feel bad. Look bad, probably. Apologize.
Ezekiel, did you go?
No, I'll go ahead and go. For me, what Ash was saying really hit the, that really helped a lot. I felt that with every section, every page I turned, I learned something new. I really enjoy, and something that's really different for me and with this book is really how she was saying how Mr. Neely Fuller really defines everything. I really enjoyed the clarification I was getting, and probably the section that stuck out the most to me had to be the powerless and powerful classes. I don't know why that resonated so much with me. Maybe it could be given my background and many of the Black people in my life thinking there's such thing as like upward mobility and social classes and there being a middle class. But that would have to be the section for me. I'm gonna go ahead and pass it to, has Edward gone?
Edward, would you like to share?
I don't know if they're connected because I don't see a little thing next to the name.
Sorry, I was muted. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah. That's stated before. I haven't read
I have a different
the
email.
second edition of the code book. So
To that email? Yeah, I know it.
Okay, can we find out?
Okay.
You won't let me. I already tried.
um,
When I was trying to watch YouTube on it.
There's
that's the code. I'm sorry.
we have Ben and Dan operating from 1984 edition. So
Okay.
if you want to share from that, it's totally fine, but it's your choice.
I sent it to me and I got the notification.
Not sure what to share. There's just a lot of information. I've been studying the code for, I don't know, 20, 25 years. Before that, studied the ISIS papers, other books as well. Had lots of meetings with Mr. Fuller, Dr. Welsing, and lots of others as well. So if I can be a resource in helping other people to understand some things that they may be confused about in their reading, I'm more than willing to do that.
That would be very helpful.
Okay.
Yeah, very helpful. Thank you.
I'm not sure where to start sharing. So
well, we're just talking about the intro, something that we thought was insightful or gave some clarification about this system from what we are discussing today. But we could just get into the discussion, honestly.
okay.
I think there's people that haven't gone yet.
Oh yeah, it's a Ray, I believe.
Yes. It's okay. So for just like quickly over something that stood out to me were the four basic stages of racism, and I really I don't want to say enjoyed this part, but I did enjoy this part because it actually got to break down what racism is entirely and how it's like maintained, how it moves forward, and how it just continues to swift over decades and decades and decades, and then how it's instilled in this like system. So I really enjoyed seeing it broken down and not just saying, oh, racism as a whole. It's like these different stages, and it's not just like one stage and that's it. So I thought that was interesting.
Agreed. So I wrote down a question, and so the code says that there are two facts, and one being the white people of the known universe collectively are the smartest and most capable of all people, and the white supremacists, racist man and racist woman, collectively are the smartest and the most capable of all of the white people. And the question is like, what are some things that like that prove this, that we could like see in everyday life, if this is true? Because I'm sure we can find people who don't think this is true. So the question is, what are some things that prove these two?
I read that, but where did you read that?
It may not be in your book because it may be something from a newer edition.
No, I remember reading it, but I'm just.
But for me, it's 16, page 16.
Yeah, it's in there. All right.
So, anyone want to take a jab at the question? I think it's true, and I think it's true because for the majority of my life, the money I've used and have relied on has come from white people. I believe they print it. So I think you have to be smart to be able to print and control the money that everyone uses. So I think that's enough evidence for me. Anyone want to share some?
So the question you're asking is whether or not we believe white people are smart.
No, I'm saying what are some things that prove these two facts from the code, from page 16, the two facts I read?
I mean, I mean, I guess the state of the planet is enough proof. I think you have to be really smart to be able to control the whole planet and be able to use those resources and take control of those resources. I think, I don't think somebody who isn't smart can do something like that. Yeah. So I would have to agree with those two facts.
But what about like rednecks and stuff and like Hicks? Are these still like smart white people, or are those just like the unintelligent white people? Are those because I hear in Australia that most of the white people are like Hicks and rednecks, but there's still white supremacy over there. So I don't think every white person is smart, just like not every black person is ignorant to the system. But maybe you all can add some insight to that. I don't know.
I don't think that they all have to be smart, because I feel like one could control the planet by stealing other people's ideas and using them against them. So I think that if one stole other people's ideas that were more powerful through the means of holding them captive as a slave, they could most definitely control the planet, just being a terrible person, but not necessarily more intelligent. I wouldn't call it intelligence. I'd just call it being a jerk.
Okay.
What about is basically they're refining it? They're just expanding practicing white supremacy. So basically, I don't think you have to be smart to kind of continue on the racist that's going on, the racism. You're just kind of feeding into the white supremacy society.
Because the blueprint's already there. So it's kind of like someone else's idea is already on the table, and you're just saying, okay, I want to continue that instead of what's right isn't true, isn't really.
I don't know, I think rednecks and these Hicks are smart enough to use racism and white supremacy to, abuse non-white people and to get what they want. So, I mean, they're definitely aware that system is in place, and they definitely know how to use its benefits. And by them using its benefits, they're able to continue, white supremacy continues.
Yeah. So yeah, I think even Hicks and rednecks have enough intelligence to be deceitful and
untruthful.
Yeah, to be deceitful and to practice racism. I'm reminded of Tiger King, who is like a definite racist suspect who definitely used deceit and harm to abuse people and get ahead.
I think Neely Fuller was referring to those German scientists and those French mathematicians and those real brainy Europeans, psychologists that were able to get together and concoct a psychological warfare. You have to be smart to install a system, to put a system in place that actually is brilliant, really, to get people, to get your enemies to kill each other. Although, right, I think they're more
But what if we
cutthroat.
could switch that around? But what if we could change that?
That's what we're doing here. I think they're more cutthroat than they are smart, though. That's the reason when those Africans brought mathematics and science and civilization itself, agriculture, everything to the Europeans, it took a lot of years, 700 years. But if you notice now, from that time to this time, everything, every culture, everything that any culture comes up with, they'll take it to the next level, man. I just, like my next door, as an example, you were asking for examples. My next door neighbor, he's a world-class swordsmith. He has refined the Japanese sword making to a level where he's on the level with the top Japanese masters.
Is he white? Is he a racist suspect?
White boy, white Nazi dude from Yonkers, New York.
Oh.
Same thing with this drum. I just bought $1,000 West African djembe. I mean, one of the best drum makers in the world. Okay, from this is Guinea-Bissau, but they also have them from Ivory Coast, right? Best drum makers in the world. White boy in Santa Cruz. African drummers go to Santa, and I hated to buy that drum from him. It hurt. Oh, it was painful. But the West African world-class best drummers get their drums from this white boy in Santa Cruz, because he has all the equipment and he has a beautiful shop and all of the materials and the skins, and they just find it very necessary to push everything. If you come up with something that's better than what they got, believe you me, they're going to try to find a way to outdo you. And Dr. Wilson explained why, because they lack melanin. So I don't. they want everything else because there's one thing that they cannot have.
I think there may be some truth to that.
I'd like to add one thing. I would say with the hillbillies being smart is if they teach their children or offspring at like 3 years old how to shoot a gun, and in regards to black parents or black offspring, we don't learn how to shoot a gun until we're like 20 or until like this pandemic takes place. So we don't have no accuracy, and a racist child can shoot us down at 6 years old. And another thing I would add is in regards to the one racist suspect, taking over a group of non-white people. I recall Mr. Fuller saying something about one racist suspect can go to a village in Africa and he could take it over by noon because he has a code.
Wow.
So that's what I got to add.
Yeah, I wanted to add to what Dan was saying. Not even just guns, white children know how to build things. They could probably build a house or something. When I never even learned how to use any sort of tools to build anything. So I think that that's also important.
Yeah, it just the way we're trained is just totally opposite to how racist men and racist women are trained. Therefore, we go to Home Depot, we see white people building what seems to be houses by all the stuff they're buying. But I'm 29, totally unequipped to survive in this war that I have discovered that I am in, unfortunately.
Then I had something to add as well. Just to answer your question, Swal. I definitely think that they're smart, because you said provide an example. So for an example, I'm thinking of just the systems within society, and specifically education system, and how they strategically set that up in order for you to go up this kind of like a chain of command in order to quote unquote be successful. So then it manipulates the mind so young in elementary, or even before getting to school. You're manipulated by your parents too, saying, oh, you have to go to do this and go to school and do all of these things. So then that's a very strategic way, because it's pushing European ideologies onto young children all the way up to adulthood. And I'm still getting my education now, and I'm 25 and I'm getting my master's. So it's this continuous cycle. And then we keep thinking oh, if I just one up, even if you want to just do research, it's to be even considered a researcher, they say you have to have some form of education. So it's the way the system is set up, specifically education, it's very intricate.
Yeah, and it's they already start off with a leg up, because every child has to learn the white person's native tongue. So they have to learn the white person's psychology, because that's what language is. It's a representation of our psychology. So already they have a leg up.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought that up, Ash. Sorry, just one more thing. And also what we are learning in these education systems, that is not only a leg up, but that is like mind controlling, because we learn nothing about like non-white history or African history. We only learn about European history. Therefore, they are pushing this from early on till now. Like we have to get to college and say, I want to take an African American studies class, and even then, it's like glossed over. So, great point, Ash. Thank you.
Yeah, and I would say that that the schools, of course, don't teach the truth, because it's not. I don't think it's about necessarily about learning only about history. It's about learning the truth. Like Dr. Francis Crespo said, like Black students, non-white students need to know that they're being inferiorized. But I think these schools just teach racist logic. They just teach our kids how to think like a white person, and therefore they grow up like, you know, like saying like, you know, when bad things happen, they're like, oh, that was dark, man, that was dark, you know, and like, you know, we just grow up saying this, using this racist logic, this coded racist speech to sub tell our brain computers subliminally that black is bad, kill black, control black. And yeah, I don't know what that does to like the brain on a metaphysical level, if it does anything, but it can't be good, you know. Definitely doesn't like do us any favors in regards of like caring about being successful in education or caring about much of anything, as far as my experience was growing up and as a prisoner of war, unaware.
Yeah, I like how Neely Fuller interconnected everything to everything. And that was an excellent question. You know, well, he made the statement and you asked the question, are white people more intelligent and more capable? I think that's how it was phrased, right?
No, I just wanted to, are they the, just to see if these two facts were accurate. The two facts being white people of the known universe collectively are the smartest and the most capable. So yeah, I guess that is the question. Yeah.
Right. So you know, I disagree with that statement. Now, in contemporary terms, yes, obviously they've structured everything to put themselves on the top, but they're the dumbest motherfuckers on the planet. Okay, these motherfuckers are not even human. They're savages. And what happened when they did get the civilization, when they did get the education, they completely, totally disregarded the spiritual. And that's why I like Neely Fuller, how he brought the definition of God and religion into it, where everything you do is your religion. And these people, when they were introduced to civilization, they had no ethics, they had no morality. They were sleeping with they didn't know animal husbandry. They would sleep with their animals and get all kind of diseases and shit. So they took the technology, but they did not take the spirituality. They did not take the morality. So you can't apply 100%. That's why we're living in total destruction right now. Total decay, total mayhem, total anarchy all over the world. Murder, rape, genocide, poison, drugs, all kind of just destruction, right? Because they took the technology and didn't take the spirituality. They did not take the morality, and the morality and the creativity is an aspect, is a component of intelligence.
But my question to you would be, if they're not the smartest people and most capable people on the planet right now, then how is the system functioning? Like, I don't know how much it matters that they had a rough start in their early days. They've like, you know, they've conquered the world, you know. And I grew up thinking that like it was impossible for someone to conquer the world. Cause I would see these villains on cartoons say they're gonna conquer the world. That's impossible. No group of people could actually take over the world. It's impossible. But then lo and behold, white people, racist man, racist woman, have done that.
Yeah, I was, you know, as Ben was talking, it made me think like this statement is actually even more accurate. Not only have white people gotten, you know, non-white people to act like them, they've also made it so that they function inferiorly to them. So in all areas of people activity, we non-white people are lagging behind, and that's that comes down to what the white supremacist has done, and comes down to the system that they put in place. So I think what Swala used the phrase earlier, but at this moment in time, I think it's a fact that white people would be considered the most capable and the smartest smartest group of people in the known universe.
Mm.
Oh, I would just, can I add one
if I
thing?
could interject,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Oh, you can go first, Ed.
Okay. So I think there's some people who are equating being smart with intelligence. And, that's fine if you want to do that. But, when it comes to measuring intelligence, how do you do that? There's really no way of doing that. If you talk to Mr. Fuller about it, he keeps everything in the simplest terms. Kindergarten logic, as he would call it. And I've asked him that question when I first started reading the code book. I think it was, I don't know, maybe 2001. And I started with a group of guys, and when they came across that phrase, they just threw the book away. You see, it's difficult for Black people to accept that white people may be smarter than them. All right. So it's, but I kept studying it. I asked Mr. Fuller that question, and his response to me was that a smart person is a person who is able to do whatever it is that they set out to do. That was the definition he gave me.
Mm.
And I said, come on, Fuller. He said, yeah, that's basically what it is. And it don't matter how they set out to do it. A smart person is able to do what it is that they set out to do. And, Black people will say, yeah, but they're conniving, they're treacherous. Well, yeah, they use all of those tools in order to get done what it is that they set out to do.
Wow.
So I asked Mr. Fuller, I said, well, what makes them smart? And he said, their code makes them smart.
Mm.
Racist code. They know exactly what to say, what to do, what not to say, what not to do, where to go, where not to go, et cetera, in order to get done what it is that they set out to do.
Thanks for that insight. And Dan, did you want to?
What I was gonna go back to the point with about like the hillbilly, kind of like white people, how like they teach racist child, 3 years old, how to shoot a gun. And I was like, I don't know if any of us can, take on racist child. Like we might,
What?
get, because they got reinforcements coming in, we don't. And we, a little 6-year-old come off the floor with a 36-year-old Black man.
Yeah, I want to introduce some harsh reality. Like, I know tons of attempted non-white parents who teach their children a ton of dance moves. Their child could do all the TikTok moves or whatever. But does their child understand racism? No. Can their child shoot a gun? Of course not. Because we're trained totally differently. We're trained to be, as Neely Fuller says, monsters and monstrosities who only want to do destructive behaviors, and that can be seen 24/7. If I'm wrong, I would love to be I love to be wrong, so I can not live in this war zone.
I think also Ed makes a really good point, because like when Neely Fuller says that, he's saying white people collectively. So it's like as a group, they're the smartest because they're the most on code and that they know what their group wants and they know what to do to get what they want. Versus non-white people, I don't even think they have a consensus on what they want, what type of society they want.
Yeah.
So they don't even know the next step to get there.
Yeah. Like
Right.
very few non-white people will say they want a system of justice where no one is allowed to be mistreated and those who need the most help receive the most constructive help. Because they'll say they want freedom and liberty, but they don't have it really well thought out enough to, you know, make it tangible, I believe. Was anyone going to say anything?
I think because people of non-white people probably feel like they don't know the next step, or we kind of had a code, but we don't know how to use our own code to come together as one.
What code did we have that we used to use?
I know probably during slavery, people used to sing songs through message, through code. But I mean, that's probably one of many, but I feel like we kind of lost out of touch of that.
I think the code needs to solve the problem. White people unfortunately had to free black people out of slavery. So this during slavery, black people were unable to develop a code. Thus far, the only code I have found is the code presented here in this book by Mr. Neely Fuller. But I could be incorrect. It could be incorrect.
But I think
just
that's due to fear and due to a lot of people would rat out runaway slaves that wanted to plot and plan to get away. So it was fear and kind of turning on each other as to why we couldn't even try to get a code or stick to a code.
Mm.
And just to add to what Carice is saying, like I totally see where the thought is going. I think the reason why this code exists now is because there has been a trend, like a shift in identity for non-white people. But if you take it all the way back, even before slavery, there had to be a code because it was a natural code, like spirituality. We didn't have to do the things now where we have to go kill and all of these things, right? Like the like violence, and that didn't really exist in the form of what we are experiencing now. And then what we're experiencing now is different than what slavery was, what they experienced during slavery. So it's like this transforming thing that's happening where we have to continuously be on code, and the code transforms. That's why there's revised and expanded versions, because it keeps getting refined. So this is where we are now. So we're at this code, so we have to figure out how to stop it now with what we have. So definitely understand what Chris is saying. So just want to add that. Great point, Chris.
That was profound. Thank you for that. There's a reason why they murdered all our leaders. They were coming up with codes. Malcolm X was trying to get us to join the Organization of African Unity, which within that organization there would have been a code of conduct for us never to hurt each other, for example, and no name calling, those kind of things.
I think it's really important to understand the two basic methods of practicing racism, white supremacy. That's from page 20 of the revised edition. And he says, according to compensatory counter-racist logic, there's reason to believe there are two basic methods of practicing racism, white supremacy: deceit, subtle or indirect violence, and direct violence, including the threat of violence. Explanation: deceit. saying things that are false and influencing non-white people to believe things that are not true. This is done in such a skillful manner that all non-white people directly or indirectly submit to and or cooperate with the practice of white supremacy, racism, violence, using or threatening to use direct or indirect bodily harm against non-white people who do not submit to and or cooperate with the white supremacists in a satisfactory manner. White supremacy racism is always practiced with deceit or with direct violence, or with a greatly sophisticated combination of both. And I'm sure as we have I'm sure as we have become less confused about this problem, we can think back on wow, this white person was being racist towards me by either lying to me or mistreating me. And especially in the people area of education, I know myself and Carice were heavily abused by our white racist teachers in elementary. And yeah, so racism, white supremacy 101, terrorize the children young so they'll grow up to find monsters.
It was basically direct.
Yeah. Any comments?
Yeah, I would have to say maybe I think deceit is probably something that I see much more often, at least in my personal everyday life. I think that direct violence that we see a lot of it seen in other places of the world, which makes me think maybe deceit is like the choice of the weapon of choice for the white supremacists when they're dealing with non-white people that are amongst them. Um, I see a lot of deceit in politicians, politics mainly. I mean, in education. I was listening to one of the coach. I was listening to it, and Neely Fuller said something along of the lines of some white person is a white supremacist the moment they withhold constructive information. So using deceit. The moment they use deceit, they're considered white supremacists under the system until it ends. And that really makes me, that really puts a lot of things into perspective. That the once you do something like that, once you commit deceit, and that's how we should be that's how we should that's how we should be following it. So once a white person uses deceit to deceive another person, they can't be trusted. I mean, none of them can be trusted.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with the deceit a lot. And I feel like even though I understand it, I still fall for it. Like I had an experience the other day where someone was supposed to be like doing maintenance where I live, and they were like telling me things that were not a big deal when I first I thought they were, but the way they said it over time, I kept thinking, oh, it is not a big deal. And then by the time they left, I was like, wait, no, they left and I have to deal with these problems that are a big deal. And that person just used deceit by like, not answering my questions and by, making me basically think I was okay when I'm not okay. And I thought that even though I'm kind of aware of it, it's so deceitful that I fall for it because I still have to remember that their intentions are not like my intentions.
Yeah.
I would have to agree with you on that, Ash. What I noticed about a lot of the ways that white supremacists communicate, they do a lot of circumlocution, and basically what that word means is that they talk in circles, and they're still remaining evasive. And so when you ask them direct questions, they just talk in circles, to keep you more confused. And what I do now when I'm asking a question and they start doing that, I go right back to the question. I don't think you've answered my question, so please let me restate the question for you, and I would like for you to give me a direct answer. It's either yes or no or whatever that may be, but don't put me in circles here. But I've noticed that they do that a lot with non-white people. Is they love talking in big circles. have you guys experienced the circle talk as well?
Oh yes. I actually it's so profound, TBH. I have a had a white professor. We're still in contact, and I only hit him up for constructive advice now as I hop on code. But I always thought he was just really like smart and like intelligent because he would use like a lot of like clever words when we were like having meetings, you know. I would like voice a lot of information about my life, you know. I'm from South Central, you know, poor, sad, you know, nigger boy, sad life, at one point, I was talking to him and he literally cried, which is a racist attack. A white person crying in front of a non-white person is a racist attack because they have nothing to cry about under the system of race and white supremacy. But it's just an example of this professor who clearly knows that my life has been not the best because of race and white supremacy. He not once mentioned that hey, it's racism. It's not really like trauma is a part of it, yes, but the trauma is from race and white supremacy. So that professor is definitely a racist suspect for sure, if not a white supremacist, according to the code. Anyone else want to care to?
I'd just like to add that. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, does anyone else want to answer? But go ahead, please.
I'd just like to say that I'm not sure who it was who brought up the withholding constructive information comment, but that's a huge one. They don't actually have to lie to you directly. They can say absolutely nothing when they should be providing you with constructive information. I notice that this happens a lot in discussions where there's more than one white person. You know, where one white person will lie directly to you, and the others in the room will say absolutely nothing. You know, so they won't try to correct that white person because, I mean, that's part of their code, right? They practice racist code in a united, independent fashion. You have to be mindful of that. They have it down to a science. So they'll say absolutely nothing. They won't say, no, what you're saying is not true. And this black person right here needs the truth. You need to tell them the truth. No, they won't say that at all. So if you're ever in those kind of situations, you know, think about that. So you'll understand in what's happening real time. You know, develop some code, what to say or what to do, so that when you're in that situation, you can respond accordingly.
Edward, I was wondering, yeah, so when you are in that situation and there's more than one white person, I would guess you would not confront the other white person who's being quiet. Would you ask them in a courteous way, like, what is your opinion on what this person said? Like, how can you figure out, I mean, I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, how would you navigate that situation in your opinion?
I would turn to one of the other white people and just ask them a simple question. Is that true? And wait for their response. That's what I've done in the past. And there are times when white people, you know, will say, no, that's not true. But they won't say nothing until I ask something. So it's really important when you're practicing counter-racism code or attempting to practice counter-racism code, however you refer to it as, that you understand what's going on in real time so that you can counter what it is that they're saying or doing. And so the person that said, no, that's not true. I say, well, okay, well, what is true? And they'll wait. they'll wait, and they might say something, and most oftentimes they won't say anything at all.
White Supremacy 101. Jeez. So, I'm sure we all, or most of us, read the classes. Actually, no, I think am I skipping ahead, or is that before? Oh yeah, I don't know where he mentions like the classes of people.
Classes are on page 14.
Oh, okay, yeah. Oh yeah, so I can ask this question. What class does everyone here belong to? And I think it'd be a good exercise, you know. So what class are we all in? I believe I am in the powerless class. I believe I was born in that class. But I did not feel powerless, but I am in the powerless collective. Anyone else want to give an answer?
I would have to agree. I'm in the powerless class also. I don't know anybody, you know, in my family or that I'm related to that would be considered in the powerful class. I'm powerless. I'm in the powerless class for sure.
Same here. Powerless class for sure.
It's I would also have to say that I identify with the powerless class myself.
I second that.
Just making sure nobody's in denial, huh?
Yes.
Powerless.
$0 net worth, powerless.
But no, under the system of white supremacy, all non-white people have value because we're owned. But I could be incorrect in that. But I think that's racist logic.
Upper middle class.
All right. Okay. Well, I hope we in your time here on planet Earth, that serves you well. Okay. I forgot my is there anything to comment? You know, to share. Well, actually, 1 second. On 19, I think it's very important that that whenever we have the fortune of talking about racism with victims who may be interested in like learning more about it, it's really important to have a definition because a lot of people like you can waste hours talking to someone talking about racism and their definition is not even the same as yours. So I want to read this definition so everyone is clear. Maybe someone may have questions on it, or maybe can even add to it, elaborate on it. So from 19, racism, one or more white people using deceit, direct violence, or the threat of violence to promote falsehood, non-justice, and incorrectness against non-white people on the basis of color in order to satisfy white people in every area of activity, economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, in war/counter war. So everyone understand this definition and how this definition functions as a global system where white people are dominating us.
That's a little different definition. Yes. That's a little different definition than the first book, I believe.
Could you read the definition in the first book, if anyone has it? If you have it in front of you?
I could. I don't have it.
Oh, okay.
Give me a minute. I can find it. I got the 1984 one.
Well, Ben has it too. Ben, it's for me it's on 19. I don't know where it is for you.
So it was the definition of
racism.
Yeah, one or more white persons using direct I was going to actually read this. using deceit, direct violence, and or the threat of violence to promote falsehood, non-justice, or incorrectness against non-white people on the basis of color in order to it's the same. Satisfy white people in one or more areas of activity, including economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and or war.
Okay.
I'm glad you went there. Can I chime in or?
Oh, no, actually, no, I was just gonna add that I actually like Cress Wilson's definition. I think they're both functional. But yeah, what are you gonna say, Ben?
So I'm so enamored with these definitions because we're talking about a people with these definitions. The meism, I don't know if you have it in there, the meism, the twoism, tribalism, and universalism. We're talking about a people from the caves and the mountains and caves and snow when the earth was not their friend. So that's where the law of self-preservation, so-called the first law of nature, is self-preservation. And we've all adopted that. We all agree to it. And that's something that's a good example of how we're behaving in the way that we've been conditioned by them, because that is not the first law of nature for the people. I was reminded, the people of the sun, of Kemet and Kush, of Africa, us, anyone speaking, thinking, acting or to satisfy himself with little or no concern for others in one or more areas of activity, including economics. Same thing with two. And then he goes into the tribalism, thinking of no one else. Whereas, the original peoples depended on survival of the group. So that meant I had to look out for you and you and you, and then in turn, you would look out for me. So it wasn't a matter of self-preservation, and so that's a form of deceit to promote and perpetuate self-preservation being the first law of nature.
Yeah, I think I found it in the first book, The Scientific Practice of Unjust Subjugation, Misuse, and/or Abuse of Persons Classified as Non-White by persons classified as white on the basis of color or non-color, and/or on the basis of factors associated with color or non-color. But it was that non-color part. I've had many discussions with Mr. Fuller about that and how that's going to confuse a lot of non-white people. And I thought I heard someone read that they have the first edition.
Yeah,
and it did not say that.
Yeah, but he has this definition. We're early in the book. I'm sure the definition that you read appears later, because I remember reading this definition later in the book as well, with a more with a different definition. But Ben and Dan, they're the ones with the older one, so they could.
Okay.
1984. That's what this book is.
Yeah.
Okay.
I agree. The non-color part is very confusing. Do you, Ed, know what Mr. Fuller's reasoning for putting that in there?
Some of the discussions, and this definition came out of the back of the 1984 edition. Years ago, he said he was trying to convey that racism, anybody that's a member of a race could practice racism. But the only functioning form of racism on the planet is white supremacy. I said, well, that's too confusing. You have to have conversations like that with Mr. Fuller. You have to almost battle him because he will hold on to it, you know. Like the conversation I had with him about maximum emergency compensatory justice. Well, that's not justice. And we went back and forth and back and forth, and he finally admitted it. He said, "You're right, that's not." And so in the new book, I am told, the latest edition, he changed it to
Action. The last word is,
what I suggested. Yeah, maximum emergency compensatory action. Yeah.
Yeah.
But unless you know, have those kind of conversations with him, you know, you can't really get to the root of what it is that he's trying to convey with those definitions.
Mm.
So I'm glad that he changed it to what it is in the later revision book so that people can get a sense of racism and white supremacy being the same thing. Because that's what it sounds like now, which is good. Because they are the same thing. There's no other form of racism in the known universe. You know, so changing that definition, I'm glad he did that.
Yeah, and the word guide, it probably has a different definition. It has the one that you read, but it may be updated. And it says racism, use this term to apply to one, the scientific practice of unjust subjugation, misuse, mistreatment, and abuse of persons classified as non-white by persons classified as white on the basis of color or non-color, or on the basis of factors associated with color or non-color, and or to the system of white supremacy. So he connected them, and yeah, I'm usually whenever it appears later in the code book, I believe he just says racism and white supremacy like together, interchangeably. I think.
Yeah, I suggest everybody, you know, if you have a few minutes in your day, call him up and talk to him about it, and he'll explain it to you. And if you have a better definition, I mean, just keep hammering it. He may adopt it.
If you want to share his number in the Zoom chat, feel free.
Okay, I think I have his number.
He probably loved to join this group.
I think it's really important to talk about the 4 basic stages white supremacy, and maybe let's take turns reading each one, and maybe elaborating on them because they may not all be that clear. So I'll start with establishment. The sum total of all speech and or action by those white people who seek to dominate and mistreat through their practice of racism, those persons classifies as non-white. Okay, so I'm guessing this is just like, you know, creating it in the first place and taking it over and right? It's just the creation part. Is that correct?
I mean, I'll go ahead.
I think so. That's all I was gonna say.
So where's that Trey? Let me see if I can find.
All right,
I mean Swab.
Yeah. That's on page 21.
In your book.
I have something. Thank you. When you mentioned establishment and you talked about like creating, like simply creating, I think it's a little bit more deep than that. Because when I think of creating, I think of just something like an idea, like, oh, I just created this and let's see if it will go. And then establishment is more of like, this is the agreement I'm standing by. This is something that I'm establishing and like pushing forward with. So it's like more of like, I don't want to use the term aggressive, but aggressive, if that makes any sense.
Mm.
Yeah, to add to what Ray was saying, I think it's more, if to give an example, it'd be, racism all already exists and maybe going somewhere where maybe racism doesn't affect people as much, and going there and establishing it there, starting it there, making sure that people can now effectively start practicing racism here because I've established it. That's kind of how I understand establishment.
Mm. All right. I think that makes sense. Anyone want to read the next one?
Maintenance. The sum total of all speech and or action by those white people who practice racism and who seek to continue, maintain the practice of racism at all times in all areas of activity.
Mm. Yep. I think I believe like 99.9% of white people participate in the maintenance, racist suspect or not. Does that make does that logic make sense?
Can you repeat that?
I think every white person participates in the maintenance of the system, whether they're a racist suspect or not.
I would agree and even say, non-white people. There's a lot of non-white people who are also taking part in that maintenance.
I agree. Agreed.
Unless they are actively engaging in a formal um, effort for truth and reconciliation and reparations. That's the only exception. If a white person is engaged in those two things, some kind of formal truth and reconciliation process and reparations.
Mm. Yeah, a white person, to like, just using logic, a white person will literally have to spend 24/7 like thinking and speaking action against racism and white supremacy, which I think due to how the system is set up, is impossible. So but yeah, but when there's a will, there's a way, that they like to say. So maybe it is possible. I don't know. But I have yet to see it, is what I do know. Any more comments about the maintenance? All right, does someone want to read the next one?
I'll read it. Expansion. The sum total of all speech and or action by those white people who practice racism and who do so in a manner that directly or indirectly helps to promote and expand the number of non-white people made subject to racism.
Hmm. And would anyone like to give an example of this expansion technique or strategy or state?
Breitbart. Breitbart is the news publication that's funded by the Mercers, who is actually behind Donald Trump and that whole movement. Nobody talks about the people that
What's it called?
behind him.
I didn't catch that.
Sorry, go. You wanted Ben to repeat what he said?
What was the movement called that it kind of skipped out on me?
It's a news publication called Breitbart. Steve Bannon was the editor, these multi-billionaires.
Okay.
And the Mercer couple, the Mercer family, are the backers of Trump and pretty much finance everything behind everything that they're doing. And they're under the radar. I don't know. Has anyone in here heard of the Mercers?
I have not heard of the Mercers, but I've heard of Breitbart.
I think a clear example of expansion could be the Middle East or Israel, where we have white people now living in the desert, and right next to that area of the world, the people who are called the Palestinians are being killed and pushed out. So that's a great example of expansion. The so-called area of Middle East, located in North Africa, that place is said to be by missionary Fuller an experiment that will go on forever, and it will consist of nothing but misery for the non-white people who are exposed to it. And yeah, that's clear to this day. We have invaded that area of the world shortly after 9/11 and 2019. I don't know how many years later, we're still killing them. A terror fact, the height of the men in that area of the world has decreased due to how many non-white males have been killed by white supremacy in that area of the world. So imagine that.
Yeah, I wanted
Yeah,
to
I wanted
add
to
for.
go ahead.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I wanted to add. I think for expansion, I think social media has contributed gravely to that. When you think about websites like Twitter and Facebook, I understand racism to be like war, and that war is, the messaging, the images, the stimulation that you are constantly being bombarded with. When you hop onto social media, you witness a lot of things that you don't want to see, that can affect somebody when they see it. So I think social media definitely plays a role in that expansion, and it definitely allows more non-white people to be subject to racism, because now there is a new platform, a new medium channel for racists to reach non-white people.
Yeah, I agree with what Quickly said. I thought that was a really good observation because I think social media is, or like just the advent of the internet in general, is like a faster way to spread white supremacy because everyone, and you can see like everyone is more likely to fit into whatever white European norm it is, not just in the way they look, but in the way they think and structure their lives. And I also agree so much with what Swa was saying. When I think of the expansion, I just think of colonialism and like invading countries. I don't think that there's like a place in the world that has not been invaded by white countries and are not dependent on white countries in some form, in terms of like trade and stuff like that. And actually what Swa was saying about the people in the Middle East, so-called Middle East, that also happened in the Philippines too, which is something that we don't talk a lot about in America, is that there was a genocide happening in the Philippines as well, which caused the average height of the people in the Philippines and Puerto Rico to be shorter because they killed so many males.
That was awesome. Just to add to that, I actually wanted to uh, I see it a little bit differently with social media. I see social media as more of a refinement tool rather than an expansion tool, only because before we hit social media, we are already manipulated into the system of white supremacy. So there's nowhere to expand because we're already affected and already like victimized. So then that goes into the social media reinforcing this idea. So then that's how like they are more efficient and the victims are being more acceptable to it. But and I think of expansion, I think of like all those expeditions and like, oh, I'm gonna go over here and trade some goods. But the idea, but in reality, their goods was I'm gonna go over there and spread my white supremacy and and vice of their goods. But yeah, when I think of media, I think of definitely that's a refinement tool. And then each time they come up with a new app, that's their way of being strategic. Like, hey, how am I going to furthermore take hold of them? So not only do we have Twitter, we have Instagram, now we have this thing called Clubhouse. Because now that they are already interested, let's go ahead and have unconstructive conversation to really wrap them around our fingers. So it's kind of interesting how this thing is keep getting refined through media and social media. So yeah, I wanted to just mention how I viewed those, or media in general, like transmedia, in these 4 stages.
I think what you said is
That's true. I think the media caused as well for Black people or non-white people to be hopeless as well. A lot of killings that they see and nothing's being done causes them to feel hopeless in the system that they're living in.
Sorry, just to add one more thing. Thank you, Carice. You brought up the idea of being killed, and I simply went to television or the news. And that's a great example of this refinement system because they already created an image and identity for non-white people, or specifically African Americans in general, African American men. So they perpetuate and continuously push this idea through television or the news, such as like, they might show like an African American male or a Black person in general like stealing something, and that's their way of continuously pushing that image of like, oh, they're all stealers, oh, they're all this.
Capitalism. Capitalism is expansionism of white supremacy, period.
Mm. Yeah, I would say what Ray said was really well said. But I would think that like, I think it could be both, like like giving going over to brown countries, non-white countries, and giving people like these phones and this technology, that could be seen as expansion and refinement, because not only are you like you know, because it could be both, I believe. But did
I'd
someone
have
read
to agree.
the refinement already?
No, but I wouldn't. I'll read that.
All right.
Refinement. The sum total of all speech and or action by those white people who practice racism in a manner that improves, refines the methods that helps to make the practice of racism more efficient and or more acceptable to their victims.
I would say, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, like, I thought the refinement is happening right now in terms of the Joe Biden presidency. I feel like the Trump presidency was more of the obvious face of America. And I think that Joe Biden becoming president is a refinement of white supremacy, because I don't think that they want people to really see the face of white supremacy as blatant as it is with Trump. They'd rather be have someone who practices white supremacy but doesn't say it so explicitly.
I have something. I don't know where this would fall into the three or to the four basic stages, but what do you all think about when it comes to like food? Food meaning, fast food, places where non-people of color live, where they have like food deserts and they're only offering fast foods, which makes it even more susceptible for you to fall into the trap of, not trap, but fall into the notion of being a part of their whole master plan of us being under their white supremacy system. Like, where would you guys, would you say that would go under refinement, expansion, maintenance, establishment, or do you think it just doesn't even would go under either?
I think it's establishment and maintenance.
Yeah.
Because I think you can't set up a white supremacist system without making people dependent. And the easiest form of dependency is like not having access to like your own food production.
I kind of think it's all four, honestly, because we have the establishment. I could see that as, getting non-white people to accept this food. Like, this is the food that we're going to be feeding you. Maintenance is you continue to give people that food. Expansion is maybe decreasing the grocery stores and increasing, fast food, therefore expanding these fast food, the amount of fast food people can get. And then refinement can be, promoting this food as healthy, having campaigns that this stuff is healthy and good for you. But, that isn't true. They'll put, for an example, they'll put, things like, 12 grams of protein on a Hot Pocket box, and I'll get people thinking, oh, this is some good, this must be good for you. It's got a lot of protein in it. But honestly, it's one of the worst things you can eat, It's one of the worst things you can put in your body. And that just goes into the refinement of it. So I honestly think that food would fall into all four of these categories.
Right. Yeah. Well, because it made me think of, I mean, this is just one example out of many, but I don't know if you guys recall, like with the KFC, that chicken sandwich where people were killing each other. Just a chicken.
Yeah,
Popeyes.
Popeyes.
And
Oh, so
now we have
okay, sorry, and my mistake, Popeyes. But yeah, it reminded me of that, and it's part of their plan of having all of us be at war with each other to help craft their master plan as they are continuing to do.
Yeah. Neely, like Neely Fuller says that to expect the food that comes from white supremacists to either poison the body or the mind of non-white people, and like food desert, like I think we should start calling like places like you mentioned, like food deserts, like South Central Oakland areas that I'm familiar with and some people in this group are. Just call those places concentration camps where, like, where poverty, suffering, destruction is concentrated on non-white people by the system of white supremacy. Like, I think that's more fitting way terminology, because does that make sense to call these places that?
yes.
Okay.
Yes, I agree.
They came out last year. They came out with the Popeye sandwich at the beginning of the year, and I just noticed the other day that they came out with one for KFC this year, and it's like a timed thing. Like every new year, they come out with this new sandwich. But I definitely think that it's chemical warfare, and I definitely think that they count on a lot of non-white people working in these establishments as slave labor, as I was one of the people that ended up in that system, and they don't take care of you.
Alrighty, I think it's time to get into well, if unless people have anything else to share.
Oh, policing, hiring, screening white police, Nazi police.
Oh yeah, but we're gonna get there for the area of law, race soldiers, race officers. Yeah, the police are like, I think that's all for it too. Police are all for it because, like, I remember when I was just like, I was aware of some things like the hyper militarization of the police, and I was just seeing the police get like new gear, get tanks in South Central, and just get new equipment every year. And now you look at them, they look like RoboCops, super cops. Some of them, like, you can't even see their faces anymore, all the technology that they have, and it's real scary. But as I understand the system, I know how to minimize the chances of me being murdered by a race soldier. But yeah, I think they're all for sure.
Also wanted to say, like, having black cops is like refinement of white supremacy too, because it kind of makes it seem like these cops like this, they're not race soldiers or something.
I've seen more than once where they've brought in a black officer to make it look like they weren't being racist when they were arresting a black man, and they've even said, "Oh, well, my partner is black, so you can't claim racism." And well, yeah, you can, but just under the white supremacy system, that's just okay.
That reminded me of
I think
something. Go ahead.
I think we should, like, call that what it is, Sandra, which is racially showcase. That person, that's a technique, strategy white people use. They racially showcase a non-white person to get away with things. But Ezekiel, thank you.
Yeah, that reminds me of kind of that. I haven't seen it. This is the only one I've heard, but with the Capitol Hill incident where that white woman got shot by the black cop. I'm not sure what that means, but I definitely think that that's a powerful image that has a lot of significance. I don't know how to really decode it at the moment, but I think that somewhere along the lines that has to do a lot with what we're talking about and having, that was kind of like a refinement or something along those lines.
Yeah, maybe that was a racial white sacrifice.
So you saying that lady that was climbing up, they trying to climb through the window that got shot, that was a black cop that shot her?
That's what I've heard. I haven't seen it
No,
myself.
I heard too.
Wow, if that's true, I mean, they are definitely not talking about it.
There's a lot of things they don't talk about.
Yeah, I think it's time to talk about the 6 major white supremacist strategies, and we can just do this kind of the same way we did the other ones. I'll read the first one and its entirety. So the first one is racial classification confusion. And it says the white supremacist racists classify people by color, non-color, based on the use of the word race. There's no reason to be a member of a race except to mistreat someone because of color or non-color. The only reason for being a member of a race is to practice racism, white supremacy. Race is racism. The only reason for practicing racism is to gain so-called benefits by mistreating people based on the so-called color classification of those people. A person who functions as a member of a race is a racist. During the existence of white supremacy, racism, however, only a white person can function as a race member, the white race slash racist. The white supremacists, racist men and racist women collectively make sure that they use whatever so-called racial classifications that they can think of that will best help them to control the thought, speech, and action of the non-white people of the known universe. They do this to give greater strength and focus to the system of white supremacy. This is one of the basic ways that the white supremacists establish, maintain, and expand and or refine racial confusion through illusion. Question: what can you say as an individual non-white person do about, well, what can you as an individual non-white person do about racial classification confusion? Answer: as long as white supremacy racism exists, consistently use the terms white people, non-white people, black, brown, red, tan, beige, yellow, etc. And 3, white supremacists, racists as the 3 racial classifications for the people of the known universe. Under all circumstances, avoid using any other terms. When others use any so-called racial classifications other than white, non-white, and white supremacist racists, ask for a detailed explanation that you can easily understand. Study all of the so-called racial classifications used by others. Ask questions about anything said that seems to be contradictory, confusing, and or non-explanatory. Be aware and or be alert for any so-called explanation that instead of clarity, focus, and logic only adds to the confusion. So yeah, I remember growing up and like black people hating being black so much that they would be like, I'm not black, I'm mixed, I'm Jamaican, and what they would say, Puerto Rican.
I'm Indian. I'm
Dominican. I'm Dominican Indian. I'm not black. I'm not African or whatever. So the racial, yeah, there we go. I'm Creole. Yep. These racial classifications serve only the white supremacists. A good term to I don't know if it was mentioned, but a good term to also use if you don't want to say non-white or black is non-race. And I'm not a member of a race because I'm a prisoner of war, So Any comments about the racial classification confusions? Any insight to share about that?
Yeah, I think like the most, well, from what I've seen, is the most confusing one is like people who hail from like South America, Central America. Like there's always a confusion about ethnicity, race, and nationality, and that people will be like, that person's Mexican. And I'm always like, well, that doesn't tell me if they're white or not, right? That person can still be white. And I think Neely Fuller talks about how those people are just so-called Indians. Those people are just Native American people, right? With mixtures of like white and black. So all other all other like when you say, you know, that person is Latino, etc., it's just adding to the confusion. So yeah.
Yeah, like I'm totally confused about. I wish Mr. Williams was here to clear some confusion I have about the Latinos Hispanic situation. But for the future, I would just ask them if someone says they're Latino or Mexican, I'll just say, "Are you white or are you non-white?" Because I don't know, Mexican. I really don't. I've been made not the not the brightest. See, there goes that racist logic programming coming out. I am not the smartest.
Yeah, it's a big complication with race in Central America. It's like you have a group of people, we're all the same group of people, but some don't define themselves as Black and some do. Or if you do try to say, hey, you're Black because you're under this, then they kind of deny it and be like, oh no, like Hondurans are Griffina as well as Belizeans, but most Hondurans don't believe that they are Black. They believe that there are Latin, right? It's the same. It's the same bloodline you come from. So if your ancestors originated from a place in Africa and then they dissect themselves to spread through Central America, you are literally considered a Black person, regardless. They just mix themselves a lot with the Mayans and the natives and the, et cetera. But you're still the sense of being Black.
Yeah, I would say that that I see most of this racial classification confusion coming from yeah, especially like Cruz is saying, like the Central Americans, Native basically non-white people. I see them, you know, the ones the most causing that kind of confusion, and it's really coming down to, you know, self-hate. I told somebody that we were all from Africa, and, you know, he told me he's West Indian. You know, he's not African, like we were saying. So that was just my 2 cents. Something that I've observed.
Which is so funny because it's like, where, how do you think the West Indians got to the West Indies? Like, do you think that they've always been, I don't know. That's just so much confusion.
Very true. I, as far as racial, I mean, even me personally, when I was younger and I came from Ghana to America, I did have like a noticeable accent. And I do believe, you know, a lot of my Black classmates were making fun about my skin. I even had a kid in particular that was the same color as me. Our skin tone was definitely dark, and he was even making fun of me, saying, "My skin's so dark," blah blah blah. So I was trying to figure out, you know, what he meant by that. I said we're both Black, but he said I was African and he was Black. So.
Yeah,
what's an African American?
It's a racial classification created by white supremacists.
Makes absolutely no sense. Just causes confusion. Sorry to cut you off. Yeah.
No, that's it. It's a racial classification used to cause, further division and conquer and confusion amongst the victims, amongst the prisoners of war. So the yeah.
Sorry, Ben. Even a comment on that. Even me myself. I was born in America. To African parents, and I definitely would say I've spent some time in Ghana, and I would definitely say I identify more as an African than I do as an African American. But even that has become like such a confusing thing to even like pick sides, I guess. It's very weird, just straight confusion. So, I can't fill out a document that asks me for my race or nationality and it says African American / black, but I don't want to say I identify as any of those. It's just very confusing stuff. And I think that's the only reason why it's been put in place, is to cause confusion.
Mm.
And then black, that's a color.
Mm-hmm.
So are we black?
Yeah.
Yeah, black,
Good
non-white,
question.
whatever you're more comfortable in calling yourself, non-race, non-white, black.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like if you're discriminated against based on your color, you might as well define yourself by your color.
What
It's
about
the least confusing thing.
What about indigenous or non-indigenous?
I don't even know what that means.
But like indigenous to where?
Because white people aren't indigenous to anywhere.
They have
Ah,
they have
see?
to be because they can't, 'cause, like, unless they all come down from the space in a rocket ship, they have to come from Earth somewhere. So I think we're all
I think
indigenous
also,
from Earth. Yeah, Ezra.
yeah, I think also one thing to note, is, Ben, he said that black people, don't come from anywhere, but if you look at most indigenous people, a lot of them are very dark. A lot of them do have dark skin. So, I mean, even there's been the whole thing about black people and Native Americans in America itself, that, there wasn't just black people didn't come to America just from slave ships. There was actually black people that lived here in America before that. So, and they would technically be indigenous. So,
well, I just find it quite interesting how they use the term Black, brown, and indigenous people. And I don't know, if you look at our skin tone, it's not pure black. If you hear, if that makes sense. We're brown. We're considered brown.
Yeah.
The rest of the folks who call themselves brown, they're really beige. So I don't know. That term right there is a bunch of chaos and confusion too, honestly.
Yeah, I feel like maybe it's just best to use white, non-white.
yeah,
Because
that's what I
agree
was
with
gonna
V.
say.
Like I've heard so many
Yeah.
people say I'm brown, and I'm like,
Oh, you're not.
like
They're beige. They're all white.
I've also always have been quite aware of that reality, that you're really like kind of vanilla, if anything, if that's even a color. But yeah. So is everyone getting clarity on like, hey, I'm just a prisoner of war, sometimes I'm black, or I'm non-white or non-race? Is that something clicking? Is that clicking for everyone?
Yeah, honestly, and having this discussion, it's causing a lot of confusion, and it's just better to, use white and non-white. Honestly.
Just imagine when we were kids, it was even more confusing, especially taking tests and you have to bubble in your race. You just be so confused to what you need to do.
I was always confused because too many different things, and they'd always want me to condense it to one. And it's like, but I'm just as much this one as that one. And they're like, no, you're more one than the other. But they always tried to put me in a box, and I always felt that it was kind of obnoxious, like how hard they tried to get me to commit to, to one of these labels.
We used to be Negroes, and then we went from Negro to what was the next one after that? Colored. And then we went from colored to black.
Yeah.
And then we went from black to African American. What's next?
I got a new one.
What?
I think I've seen this a lot, and people are calling themselves ADOS, African Descendants of Slavery.
Yeah.
And that for me, and that's causing a lot of confusion and chaos as it is, because now when you bring up reparations, it's like, well, trying to exclude some black people. It's like everybody has suffered and needs some kind of repair job done. So it's like
Well,
it just
I don't agree with that.
I
I,
know. Okay,
no,
I don't. I
yeah,
don't.
that's a side
Yeah,
conversation.
I
We
don't
can
want
talk
to try
about that
to
another
sidetrack.
time.
But yeah, I think this is a great
But
example.
I think you can also just say I'm whatever the white supremacist tells me I am when asked.
Oh, could I add one thing to the racial classification confusion?
Go for it.
When you start adding in a white parent or like non-white with a white parent, that adds a lot of confusion. With the like so-called Asians, it's like usually like a white man with an
L.A.
Asian
Rogers.
female, and then sometimes that offspring can function as a white person because we shouldn't use the term honorary white person. It's in the, I think in the word guide, because that has confused me in the past quite a bit. Non-white with a white parent, and it's like a so-called Asian. So.
Yeah, I've seen that a lot.
Yeah. Yep. Elliot
I
Rogers.
also think there's like a concerted effort to turn Asian people into white people by like a lot of intermarriage between Asian women and white men.
Say it louder, Ash.
Well, to make them better slaves are like more like to make them function as better servants to the whites, because can Asian people truly be function as white people? Like,
I mean, at one point Italian people couldn't.
I have no clue. Like,
I think it's whoever the white supremacist wants to be white.
Yeah.
I know when I was in Santa Rita, all the black and brown people were on the inside, and all the Asians and whites were on the outside. I know that when I was in jail.
So I think it's time to move on. Anyone want to read the second one? You don't have to read all of it, just as much as you care to.
I go ahead and read that one. So racial population dislocation confusion. The white supremacist racist the white supremacists often selectively force large and small numbers of non-white people to move from one place to another. They guarantee that the system of white supremacy is maintained forever. Oh, sorry. They apparently have often judged it necessary to do this if they intend to guarantee that the system of white supremacy is maintained forever. Racist man and racist woman usually practice racial population dislocation confusion against non-white people by causing, promoting, and or taking non-just advantage of food shortages, water shortages, shelter shortages, the spread of disease/germs, the distribution of poison/chemicals, armed conflicts, fire destruction, floods, earthquakes, legal decision, and or ownership disputes or trickery. The methods that they use and intend to continue to use will be similar to those methods used to conduct racial population tailoring. During the existence of the system of white supremacy, the white people of the known universe, generally speaking, have the privilege of relocating either among or away from the non-white people. The non-white people of the known universe are dislocated whenever the white supremacists decide to cause them to be dislocated. The white supremacists go where they choose to go. Non-white people go where the white supremacists allow them to go.
Does everyone understand that bit?
Yeah, it reminds me. I used the term relocate earlier, and I don't know. I feel if the system of racism and white supremacy didn't exist, maybe I wouldn't have to have relocated. Maybe I could have gotten along with the people I was living with, but because the system of racism and white supremacy exists, I in a sense, was dislocated.
Yeah, I have also been dislocated multiple times. due to racist men and racist women. I'm sure many of us in this struggle have been. Any comments about racial population dislocation?
Yeah, I think personally, like it's probably one of the most powerful tools used right now in terms of like worldwide. I would say you can see how a lot of people like are like either pushed into cities and then subsequently like pushed out of cities and given like and put into places where there's like no work, no access to like food, etc. And it's like you literally just and you just see people migrating all the time. Like I think I was talking to Carice and she was telling me she knows people who have moved like 5 or 6 times within this year and how common that is for a lot of people, especially non-white people. And so I think that like it's the most powerful tool being used right now personally because that constant displacement makes it really hard to build any form of like grouping that can actually like, you know, fight against racism, white supremacy. When you're constantly moving, your mind is constantly on the most barest minimum of like how to survive, I think.
Mm. Yeah, huge stress there, having to like move and relocate constantly.
I feel
So
like buildings, they do that a lot. They feel like, oh, we're going to renovate it, we're going to remodel it. And then they decide to move all these people in a specific area. And then they'll be like, oh, we'll let you know when it's finished. But then they move a whole new, different set of people in there and leave you where you at. So I feel like they do that a lot in communities as they trying to revamp.
Thank you for
Yeah,
thank
there's
you for
oh
that.
sorry, go ahead.
I'm just gonna right quick. I worked for the city of Oakland for 25 years, and I know for a fact that they did not provide the services for certain areas. They allowed the property values because of city services, policing, and other structural infrastructure services were not being deliberately delivered so that the property values would drop. People who were living in maybe rental properties, um, and other like maybe Section 8 or whatever, um, property values just totally drop, and so then white people come in and buy it up cheap and evict you because you can't afford to. And that's the system. That's how they systematically. Same thing happened in San Francisco. I was born and raised in San Francisco. It was 18% black when I was growing up.
then
Now it's 2% black. Why?
yeah, yeah. That now they got movies called "The Last Black Man in San Francisco."
Thank you.
Tragic and racist
Right,
white supremacy. 101 right there.
right. No, well, Silicon Valley moved in and drove up the property values, and in cahoots with the city of San Francisco, um, started moving people out. And then where do they move? Stockton, Sacramento. No jobs out there unless you're a truck driver.
Mm. Ugh, alrighty.
Yeah, and I wanted to add to like in those cities in San Francisco and New York and LA, 50% of those luxury buildings are empty. So if they wanted to house everyone, they could. They choose not to. It's a concerted effort. And they stay empty. So a lot of times they're not even recuperating the money that they got in building them.
Racism, white supremacy.
Oh, I had something I'd like to add in to the racial population dislocation. A phrase that comes to mind with dislocation is something in so-called black culture. Black parents do at 18. You getting out of my house is something that comes to mind because of throughout this whole pandemic situation, I had to move. And I presented to my attempted mother, I did the math. And also, this is something that happened in the city I live in. The property manager or the realty person, they came out on the 4th of July with a racist rant. And they was like, I'm proud to be white. And they went in on every non-white group, Black people, so-called Mexicans, Asians, and they own like 40% of the property in the city. And when I did the math and I showed my mom, I lived in this prison cell of an apartment for 4 years. I was like, this is about $20,000 of rent money I paid this racist. And I just sent his racist child probably through college. I paid for their tuition. Meanwhile, I don't have a degree.
And see, that's real systemic. And see, this is sorry. This I gotta get in here. You know, the suburbs were created. You know, the projects, for example, there's some projects called the Sunnydale Projects in San Francisco. Those were white. Those projects, most housing projects were built after World War II because there was white soldiers coming home with their money from the war, and there wasn't housing for them. It wasn't a financial issue. They didn't have houses. Everybody was too busy fighting the war to build houses for people to live in. So the government had to come in and hurry up and build a bunch of housing for these white soldiers and people. And when the economy improved, the government gave huge loans to private contractors to build the suburbs, and then subsidized loans for the white people to borrow the money to go move out into the suburbs. And so these projects started becoming vacant. They had Black projects, but they were segregated. And these white projects started getting more and more vacancies, and more Black people started to move in because the loans weren't available to Black people for those subdivisions in the suburbs. That's how we got relegated into the projects. It wasn't you're lazy, you're not working, you're trifling. No, it was white supremacist racism, pure.
Alrighty. Does anyone want to read racial population tailoring confusion? A bit of that.
Okay. This racial population tailoring confusion. This means that white supremacists, racists may kill large numbers of non-white people, either directly or indirectly, in selected areas on a massive scale. They will kill them by drying out or poisoning the water supply, dumping poisonous waste, etc. They tailor the population for the purpose of maintaining better control over all the remaining non-white people. They have many ways of doing this. The white supremacists sometimes kill large numbers of non-white people on an ongoing, well-thought-out basis. They do not intend to kill all the non-white people of the known universe. They intend to tailor the number of non-white people by killing a calculated number in different places at different times according to whatever will best fit any long-term or short-term plans that racist man and racist woman have in mind for better control and future domination and mistreatment of non-white people. Part of the white supremacist racist plan of killing selected populations of non-white people is to, from time to time, produce situations among non-white people that will guarantee that they will, out in anger, frustration, jealousy, want, and or confusion, kill each other. All of this racial population tailoring is designed to have the effect of guaranteeing that the non-white people of the known universe in their greatest numbers will not be of any major constructive value to any people except racist man and racist woman. What can you, as an individual, do I read that part?
It's your choice, but I don't. It may not be necessary, but it's up to you. I think it could be constructive for the people watching if you want to, but your choice. I'm sorry.
Okay. What can you as an individual, non-white person do about racial population tailoring confusion? Do your best to get enough information.
Wait. Can you repeat that, please?
What can you as an individual, non-white person do about racial population tailoring confusion? Then it has stuff below that.
Yeah, and then the answer to that is do your best to get enough information about how you can best avoid every situation that is likely to involve you in killing people or being killed by people, and always expect the unexpected. Seek to know and understand the different methods that racist men and racist women use to kill non-white people in order to tailor non-white populations in various places in order to satisfy whatever plans they have made for the current or future benefit to the system of white supremacy. As long as white supremacy racism exists, always speak and or act as if you know for sure that racist man and racist woman will not stop committing acts of racial population tailoring. Inform others about whatever you believe that the white supremacists are likely to do in their practice of racial population tailoring. Be willing to help others avoid situations where non-just bodily harm is likely to occur. When there are no better choices, use counter-racist counter-violence to defend yourself and or others as best as you can. Anyone have any comments, questions about racial population tailoring confusion? I don't know if it's in the 1984 edition.
My only comments were when I read that, I started thinking about Flint. I'm always remember that. It just got me thinking about what's going on over there. I haven't, heard anything about a count or how many people, are dying over there because of the water issue. As far as I'm aware, that issue's still ongoing. So I definitely know a lot of people have been affected. And I wonder if tailoring only includes killing. What if it possibly include leaving people handicapped, unable to provide for themselves or actively do something against racism and white supremacy.
Also sterilization.
Sterilization. So maybe tailoring shouldn't only be limited to killing. I don't know. Maybe that's something I could ask Neely Fuller.
Yeah, and also, shoot. Oh yeah, and also, he didn't mention how they will like destroy like a dam and flood a city to kill people. How they may have weapons. No, they do have weapons to control the weather. There's a documentary I watched recently about how they were controlling the weather in Vietnam to prolong the monsoon season. So they have weapons to control the weather, produce earthquakes, I believe. So they have many ways of tailoring the population. So it's just something to be aware of in the system of racism and white supremacy.
I think that anytime that there's an emergency, they have a way of exploiting it to take the power back if they felt that the non-white people were getting power, that one of these things would come.
Yeah, there's actually a white woman wrote a book about that. It's called like disaster. It's called the shock doctrine, and it's how basically like after any sort of natural disaster, they come in and they basically find, like they did that in Katrina, and they find ways to exploit the people that are there and displace them, and then bring in like new money, new housing, things like that.
Yep.
You just made me think about this massive, just unprecedented land grab that's happening in Africa. They're buying just acres and acres of that land over there.
Because they know what's under it.
And so they're moved there, since they own it, they're able to do with the population what they would, and the corrupt governments are just taking whatever money they can get from the people that are buying the property And so, you know, if I win this Powerball, which is 600 million, or if I win the Mega Millions, you know, I don't know if you heard about it. They're up to 500 million and 600 million. But I would go to Africa and because our African brothers and sisters are far less educated on white supremacy than we are. They're totally indoctrinated. I mean, it's unbelievable how much the what we all suffer from that are not woke, the Stockholm syndrome. They have fallen in love with their captors, and so they need this. They need what we're doing. So what I would like to do is take all of this literature, what we're gonna, you know, all the stuff we're studying, and more, all our Black studies, and grow food and teach Black studies in Africa.
That's definitely constructive, for sure. Any more comments of racial population tailoring confusion? You often hear this called population control or population control. Oh, it reminds me of what I wanted to say. Chemical warfare. When the whites were coming over here killing the natives, more natives were killed by germs and diseases given to them by white people than they were by guns, and a lot of them were killed by guns. So chemical warfare seems to be a big favorite that white people like to use.
Actually, I read a book about like Native American history, and it said that that's actually not true, and that's propagated by white people, and
dang.
that they actually did just outright kill them.
Oh dang.
Like, yeah.
Well, nonetheless, white killing, lots of killing involved in population tailoring confusion. Any comments, or can someone read some of the next one? I think the only options are the people who have 2016 version, because this stuff is not in the old versions. All right, I'll just read it. So racial showcasing confusion. I think I'm gonna read the part that's really, it's a lot, so I'm only gonna read the parts that's really important. All of it's important, but enough so people can understand. So this is like from the middle of the definition. And he says the white supremacists sometimes carefully select and give great amounts of money and or publicity to large but carefully controlled numbers of non-white people. The white supremacists sometimes showcase the chosen non-white persons as being extremely wealthy, extremely comfortable, and or mostly and falsely extremely powerful. The white supremacists showcase these selected non-white people as being totally successful and not being victimized by and or being subject to the system of white supremacy, racism. The purpose of this is that so if any non-white person starts talking about racism in the future, they will be laughed at because it may appear that white supremacy has been put out of business. However, white supremacy is a world business, and like any other business, it works according to the logic of profits and losses, which means percentages. When one goes into business, one expects some loss. The white supremacists know that the cost of doing the business of white supremacy can increase or decrease. Racially showcasing carefully selected non-white people is one of the major ways that the white supremacists help themselves to maintain, expand, and or refine the system of white supremacy. So that's racial showcasing in brief. Just think of like your celebrity. Just think of anyone who will like you to call them their leader. Anyone who seems to be a celebrity or a public figure, so-called influencer. There's many titles they give themselves, But unless they're talking about solving the problem, I wouldn't consider them to be constructive or anything other than being racially showcased. Any comments about this one?
Yeah, I think this one is also a really powerful strategy because I remember reading something about how like the states in America that have, you know, some of the worst conditions for Black people are run by, or so-called run by Black people. There's a lot of like Black governors, Black mayors, etc., who have who like are racially showcased and do the bidding of white supremacy. So I think that that's like a really important thing, that because it's not just like the people like celebrities, it's like that like when we think about wanting to vote for a certain person because they're Black, like they probably have reached that position because they've been racially showcased. And unless, you know, they've given you some signs that they're aware that they're racially showcased, I would err on the side of caution of trusting them.
Yep. Well said, Ash. Mm. Any comments about racial showcasing confusion?
Well, I think that this one was definitely, like Ash was saying, you know, the best one. I don't know, lack of a better word. Like I think that no, this was the most confusing one. It took up 3 pages. I think this is something that we see a lot of, and that even those of us, speaking for myself, even though I'm less confused than I was, I still fall for this sometimes. But racial showcasing is a huge problem, and it's honestly something that's very difficult to deal with, especially when people are, at least in the past, it's been very difficult to deal with that when people have addressed it or brought it up. But thank you, Neely, for giving me a strategy and some methods to tackle that.
Yeah, for real. Like we should all be like have a easier time like avoiding being confused by other victims because they're not the problems. The problem is white people, white supremacists collectively. You know. Yeah. I think we should get into closing comments. I believe. Anyone would like to start?
I can go ahead and start. So this is my first day at the book club. I enjoyed the stimulating conversation. Really looking forward to coming back next week. I enjoyed it. Hope everybody does come back. Um, the book is good. You know, I think this is some tangible, you know, information that I can, you know, actively put into my life every day, practice it. So this is definitely something that's different than a lot of the other stuff I've read. So I'm gonna continue to incorporate that into my life, and I'll come back and report on it. Tell you guys how it went.
And I can go next. To close off, this was definitely so far something just so great, a great addition to my life. I feel like, just to add on to what Kwaku says, like it's definitely something that's tangible and something we can live by, which I like because we always have those things that say, hey, you should do this and you should do that. And it's just like a say. And it's nothing that you can read and you can follow that you can have in your hands. And every time you do something, like, you know, that wasn't a codified response. Let me go back to the book, right? Let me go back to the source. And I think that is very important to have, especially um, in this day and age, because we're so heavily on our internet, the social media. Is like, you know what, let me step away from the devices and actually have a tangible book to go to and to carry around with me that's not on a device that can be manipulated and wrapped around different things and missed messages. But yeah, so I'm so glad that I am reading this book and I'm ready to get through it with all of you and have discussions about it. Thank you.
Well said. Um, yeah, it was nice hearing that from y'all. I I'm just happy. Well, I'm not happy. I'm like grateful to see like fellow prisoners of war attempting to get on code, learn code, and share the code So maybe we can put a dent into this problem or solve this problem in the next 5 years or so. I believe it is possible. I know it's possible actually. It's really epic having Edward Williams here, being able to share some of his insight with us. Hopefully, he'll be back next week. But just the knowledge sharing and the really seriousness of the topic we're learning, and like the openness to accept the reality. I have learned the hard way that non-white people have a aversion and an allergy to truth. It's very uncomfortable to realize that there's a war being waged against us. But the people who realize and do something about it are like perhaps some of the bravest people in the universe. I could be incorrect, but I am leaning towards that.
Well said.
I just feel very fortunate to be in this club with you, young brainiacs. Um, um, to be just I feel honored, to be accepted into this group, to be able to exchange thoughts and ideas and information with with such intellect. Me being the probably the least educated in the group. uh, I'm getting some and you're keeping me young, you're keeping me fresh and excited and stimulated to fight the good fight and to stay woke and to take every opportunity to point out to white folks that the reason they have what they have is because of genocide and enslavement, in a tactful way. I don't just go attacking, but and I ask them oftentimes, how does it feel to know that all of your privilege and what you have is because of murder, robbery? I really, dig in on them.
A better question, because it's not white, it's not privileged, it's white power, and we have to really be careful about calling white supremacy a privilege. It's a power system. It's not a privilege to be able to go shoot a black male or black female dead. That's power. So maybe ask them, how's it feel to have such awesome power? How's it feel?
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. I will do that.
No worries. No worries. But yeah, I always
Oh, okay.
by one short thing, I would say any victim attempting to counter this problem is an invaluable asset. Carice, you were gonna say something?
I'm excited for this book. Finally, I got my copy. So just to learn off of each other and to spread the word and to know the code, because I didn't know that some strategies are created for confusion or to make us be misled. So just to know the strategies and different ways to get ourselves on code, it makes me feel more hopeful. So I think educating yourself always makes you feel hopeful about um, defeating white supremacy.
Ezra.
Yeah, closing comments for me. I definitely will say, just to piggyback off what everybody's saying, this is probably one of the most, this is probably the most constructive thing going on in my life. And, I'm always open to learning more. Every time I come into this book club meeting, I always learn something new. And, I go back into everyday life and able to recognize, some of the symbols, some of the situations, and act accordingly. So I'm always grateful to the book club, and I definitely will be back. This book is just, it's, I've had many conversations about racism, white supremacy, and the one thing, people ask me is, what are you going to do about it? I don't know. I have no idea why they would ask me that, a regular Black male in America who has absolutely no power, and I just like to show them that these are my solutions here. These are the small steps that, all of us can start taking, to actually do something about the problem. The problem, we're talking about 2,000 years of oppression, maybe even more.
Yeah, 4,000 is a more accurate number.
4,000.
But Ezra, I would say
Thank
to
you.
you, when people ask you what you're going to do about it, you could probably say, I'm going to attempt to solve the problem. What are you going to do about it? Because I believe everyone here is attempting to solve the problem, because that's whole purpose of this book club is to solve this problem, and it's
definitely
very possible. So I think that would be a nice rebuttal for you next time.
Yeah, especially if that person.
Yeah, honestly, that's definitely a good answer. So what were you saying, Ash?
If that person is also non-white, then I think that should be your question. Wait, what are we doing about it? Like, aren't you also, under a system of racism, white supremacy?
Oh, well, obviously, if they're asking me that, we have different definitions, right? For some reason, we're facing different oppression. But what can I say, man? My eyes are open a little bit more. I'm less confused, happy slave, just wandering around the world aimlessly, just trying to have fun. No more, it's no longer. So I'm grateful, man. I'll be here next week because knowledge is power, man. And I was really glad to see Edward Williams in the meeting today. We were talking about that, and I'm glad that he finally picked SWAT up. So I hope he'll show up again next week, because man, there's something about that guy talking. But anyways, that's my closing comments for this week. Yeah.
Well said. Things. Dan, would you like to?
Okay. One thing I will add, privilege. It is in the word guide, page 301. Privilege. Use this term to apply to the will plus the ability to seek truth and to use truth in such a manner as to promote the production of justice and correctness. And I'll also add, it's constructive to exchange views with other people that are trying to get familiar with the code. And United Independent.
Agreed. Well said. All right, thanks everyone, and we'll surely see whoever comes next week.
Hey, how about this?